The information contained in this video is strictly for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or other professional advice and is not a substitute for consultation with a qualified professional. The opinions expressed in the show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and the City University of New York. State of Mind is a web-based discussion program that explores the relevant social, economic, and political issues that are prominent at the post-secondary level of education. State of Mind is sponsored by the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC. Start here, go anywhere. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Today we're kicking off a three-part series entitled Under Pressure. Today's topic is about pressure, stress, and burnout. It is said that college is the best time in a young adult's life. Although that may be true in hindsight, for many it can also be the most stressful time. The demands placed on today's students require them to continually find ways to differentiate themselves from their peers, while at the same time they are pushed to their limits both mentally and physically, and still expected to come out as well-adjusted individuals. In the race for academic and eventually professional success, it begs the question that students across the country are faced to ask: how do I avoid burning out? With us here today to help better understand the various perspectives on the topic are the following guests. To my immediate left is Dr. Rhea Almeida, who is a family therapist, trainer, educator, and founder of the Institute for Family Services. She is also the creator of the Cultural Context Model, a liberation-based healing perspective. Dr. Almeida serves on the boards of numerous peer-reviewed journals and is the first appointee as a practitioner to the Council on Social Work Education, the accreditation body for social work. She was a graduate of Columbia University. To her immediate left is Dr. Priscilla Rogers-Fahy, who is a licensed psychologist and currently the Associate Director of the Counseling Center at BMCC. The BMCC Counseling Center provides high-quality counseling and mental health services to students and consultative services to faculty and staff. Dr. Rogers-Fahy received her bachelor's in psychology and social behavior from the University of California, Irvine, and she received her master's and doctorate in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology at San Diego. And finally, we have back on our show Dr. Brady, who is the Dean of the Schreyer Honors College and Associate Professor of Classics and Ancient Mediterranean Studies and Jewish Studies at the Pennsylvania State University. He serves on the Faculty Senate Committee for Undergraduate Education, the University Ethics Committee, and an appointment to the Advisory Committee for Continued Excellence. Dr. Brady holds 2 advanced degrees from the University of Oxford, a graduate diploma in Jewish Studies, and a doctorate in Oriental Studies with a concentration in ancient Hebrew and Jewish literature. His baccalaureate degree in Near Eastern Studies and History is from Cornell University. Dr. Almeida, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, and Dr. Brady, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off the conversation with you, Dr. Rogers-Fahy. And what is it about the college environment that causes students to feel so much pressure?
I think there's a lot of different things going on for most of our college students, especially here at BMCC. Most of our students are working full-time. They may be taking care of young children. They have maybe an elderly or sick parent that they're also sort of taking care of in the home. And they also, some of my students are taking care of younger siblings as their parents have to work. So they're balancing running home, picking up their brothers and sisters from school, and themselves trying to come to school and work. So I think there's a lot of external factors sort of going on outside of just being able to come to school, study, and enjoy your time here.
Interesting. Dr. Brady, you've seen students at the Pennsylvania State University Schreyer Honors College. From a more traditional 4-year program standpoint, are the stresses that students currently face today any different from years ago?
From years ago, I don't think so. I mean, it's a little bit easier probably to say, what stresses are this age group not feeling, I mean, it's coming at them from all areas. At a place like Penn State, it's a residential model, so it's a different kind of environment. In that context, you're taking students who are not yet fully formed mentally and emotionally, and we're saying your entire life is now going to be here. These are the people you're going to live with, these are the people you're going to work with, these are the people you're going to eat with, and here are the rules and regulations and so on and so forth. And somehow we expect that all to just go off without a hitch. That's obviously not the case, because they're thinking about their future, they're learning about themselves and who they might want to be with for the rest of their lives, and it's just everything is there together. It's hard to think of anything that's not impacting them in terms of a stress.
Interesting. Dr. Almeida, they say that stress comes from many factors. Is there a difference from stress brought on by external factors versus stress brought by oneself?
I think it's hard to sort of tease those out. It's really a confluence of factors. You know, one sort of feeds the other in many ways. But I just want to piggyback on what the other two speakers just addressed, which is there's so many different collision forces that enter a person's life when they're leaving home. You know, they leave home thinking they're independent and they're ready to start college, but they've never really cooked for themselves, they've never shopped for themselves, they've never done their laundry, they've never navigated strange people for the first time. So it's, and then dealing with these classes, negotiating and organizing the time. So it's a lot, and I think the stress is sort of cyclical, you know.
Okay. So Dr. Rogers-Fahy, in regards to stress and students, what are some of the ways students can identify that they are feeling the stress, and more importantly, how can they help channel it in a positive way?
First of all, I think the sort of things that you're sort of looking for are the physical symptoms are sort of the easiest ones that sort of one notices, right? They sort of have this nervousness, shortness of breath, may have all these heart palpitations, and they think that, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack, I need to go to the hospital. In reality, it's I've had a panic attack and I've never experienced it. They may be feeling, you know, some sort of dizziness, nausea, loss of appetite. They start to socially isolate themselves, or not making friends, or joining any clubs here on campus. So there's all different levels of, I think, of different types of stress that sort of come about.
So I have to ask, and I'm by no means trying to minimize it at all, anxiety, panic attacks, how much of a prevalent thing are they on the campus setting?
It's large.
Okay.
It's large.
And is that brought on by the academic environment, or is, again, I don't want to make it binary, or is it brought by the individual, or is it a confluence of the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a confluence of the two and multiple factors. And actually, for many kids, they don't even get to the point where they feel the anxiety. They're drinking or they're doing something else to medicate themselves. So they've already developed a secondary problem before they've identified the anxiety.
Interesting.
Right.
And do we find that at the BMCC, the counseling center, do you guys are able to get ahead of that before it comes down to a road that leads to, you know, stimulants or abuse of them?
That's an interesting question. I think that we really try to do a lot of outreach, especially at the beginning when they're coming in. But yet again, we have, you know, 30,000 students.
Right.
It's hard to reach all of them.
Sure.
We definitely have a very strong base where faculty and staff know where we are. So if they can identify a problem of a student in the classroom or who may need assistance, we've actually had faculty and staff actually walk them down to the counseling center and say, can you please help them? Just because they may have burst out crying in the classroom.
Interesting.
Do you feel at BMCC that you are adequately able to respond to it? And I ask because Chronicle of Higher Education just had a story yesterday or today, and one of my colleagues at Penn State was cited, and what we're seeing at our universities, and these were larger state universities, is that there is such a demand now. And even though we've just hired a number of new individuals, counselors at Penn State, we're still not able to meet the need. Students come in, they do a triage program by and large, and in some cases, not at Penn State thankfully at the moment, but at some cases, students are having to wait 2 weeks just to have the meeting to figure out what's going on, the triage, before they can go on to counselors. Are you able to meet the needs of your student population at the moment?
Right. We're very lucky that we don't have a 2-week waiting list. That we are a staff of psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, licensed mental health care workers. We have a large staff of about 10. And we're still looking to hire more. So especially in times of crises, we immediately all respond, and we can immediately handle the student as best we can.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Dr. Almeida, they say that the ability to cope with stress can be a sign of great mental fortitude. That is, life is going to throw you a lot of challenges, and those that can really succeed are the ones who can deal with the stress and handle it in a positive fashion. What is that fine line between pushing someone to be able to find that ability to cope versus pushing them beyond that ability? And where does that fine balance come into play in terms of understanding an individual's mental psyche?
Right, and I think a lot of these developmental factors you're addressing really begin before the kids come to school. I mean, the college ends up seeing a very sort of compressed version of it. But if you go backwards and look at the foundation, many kids who really never navigated any failure don't have what I would call character strength, so that they can't really deal with the failure in a way that would get them to jump right back and figure out another solution. They're very academically focused for that particular population. So when they throw a curveball, it's really hard for them to sort of pick up and move in another direction. And I think friends are really important, and again, it goes back to how the family deals with friendships. A lot of the kids that we work with who come to us from the universities around, they're very isolated. They're usually kids who've not had any friendships, and they're struggling to make friendships because that wasn't something that was, you know, heightened in the home.
Sure. So Dr. Brady, I have to ask you, I've had a chance to meet several students from the Schreier Honors College, very bright individuals, very motivated, a lot of pressure putting on themselves. What have your observations been with your students, and is stress and pressure something that they've been able to manage and cope with healthily?
Some are certainly obviously able to cope with the stress better than others. One of the things we're actually going through, going to do some surveys over the next 3 months to try and discern whether the fact that we're seeing so many, for example, eating disorder issues and other issues presenting themselves is disproportionate in the honors community versus the non-honors. Because it's certainly present around the campus as well, but our offices are right there in the residential component. So we're not sure whether we're seeing more of it because we're close, we're accessible to our students or not. Many of them do develop coping mechanisms. As Dr. Almeida said, that unfortunately in the college environment in particular, they often are encouraged societally to self-medicate, as it were, through alcohol and other means. And that's really the challenge there. Is to help them to be aware and to destigmatize much of this. You know, one of you asked earlier, is this different than previous generations? It's really hard to tell. You all are the experts in the field, but my experience tells me we're seeing more students, we're aware of it more, but I don't know that that means that there are more problems now than there were in the past, or more people are struggling or wrestling with stress now than in the past. It's just that now, at least thankfully, we're recognizing it and we're trying to provide them with help. I think that's my sense. I don't.
Well, I mean, the one thing that I agree with you, the one thing I would emphasize is the fact that there are many more kids today having to work and support themselves, so they don't really enjoy the engagement on campus and the engagement in class. So for them, it's a lot more difficult because they have to work, they're managing their financial bills and work. And so those kids, I think retaining those kids is really a challenge.
Interesting. So at the BMCC Counseling Center, we alluded to stimulants, coping mechanisms, abuse of those stimulants. Is there at least also more of an awareness of the individual to identify that they have to go down that road to be able to deal with it? I mean, are students aware when they are abusing stimulants that at least I'm doing this, I know I'm doing this because it's the only way to help deal with the stress, Dr. Rogers-Fahy?
I think that some students can. I think that some students probably don't come in and won't be able to talk about it because they're not at that point yet where they even want to recognize that it may be a problem or maybe something that they're over abusing or because right now things are working for them. When you're young and you're resilient, things are sort of going a good way. You're not going to necessarily identify that you have a problem until you sort of have hit rock bottom.
So at the
well, it seems to me, and I'm going to ask for your thoughts on this, but my reaction to your question would be, well, there's so much socially that says we're going to go out drinking, we're going to do these things, that I think it is difficult for the students to pull that apart. Dr. Almeida, I think you mentioned that we may not realize till later on that there's anxiety going on here because they're masking it. Is that your sense, or is it, or are they really aware, saying, you know, I'm going to go out drinking tonight because I'm so stressed and so upset that I can't deal with it any other way?
Some, it depends, because our students aren't as traditionally 18, 19 years old. We also have older students, so we have a very we have a wide range of just different students. What's definition of student? So I think you could probably find some that would fit in either category. Definitely.
And I mean, I would say that if kids know that, if it's a conscious decision, they're less likely to be owned by the substance abuse. It's those that are sort of not that critically conscious and they're drinking and not even aware that there's a connection between the high anxiety performance and the use of substances.
But to your point, it could also be the social structure they're around. If everyone else is doing the same thing, they're going to follow in turn because it works for them, so why not follow the crowd?
And I think a lot of the literature shows that the high party schools with the high athletic teams really pressure a lot of the kids to engage in that partying behavior, which then sort of, it's the norm more than the kids that don't participate are viewed as being outsiders and marginalized. So It's
Not,
really
not to name any institutions
not
in
to name,
particular.
no, of course not.
I mean, those dynamics are real. I mean, we're operating in very different environments. Neither is better or worse than the other. I mean, you have, as you said earlier, you've got students who are supporting their own children or their siblings or their parents. We have students who are isolated. There's part of this culture of tailgating and weekend parties, fraternities and sororities. And all these things come into it. And then when you do deal with the adolescent age, there's an interesting piece that was on NPR this summer about some research. I think it was published in Nature. Again, this is your area, not mine, but I remember the piece that that teenage boys are wired to take risks.
Yes.
At one time in our human development, that was necessary for survival. Now it's not, but the impetus is still there to take those risks, to step out and do it. And yet we're saying societally and certainly as an institution, don't do that. Sit here on the campus and do these things, and don't experiment sexually. Don't try other things. Don't climb up the side of a building, Parker and Big Mac. And so it's just ripe for all of these tensions and pressures, even without just here, take a class and do well.
Right.
That's enough on its own to create anxiety
Absolutely.
when we add all the rest.
So Dr. Dean Brady,
Yes.
how is faculty and administration, at least to speak to Penn State University, how are you trained to identify stress amongst students and to at least act as a voice or a source they can go to at least unload on?
The reality is in most universities and colleges, faculty are not trained for this.
Okay.
And more specifically, faculty don't want to be. This is not the field I went into. I trained to become a historian. I trained to become an engineer. I was educated in this field. But that being said, certainly in our institution, I think most of our universities around the country now, our counseling centers really reach out to the faculty and they give us information and flyers to let us know what to look for, what's there, to know where to direct our students. So you know, as an administrator, I'm not in the classroom as much, but ironically, I see lots of students coming in. My wife is a faculty member who teaches 90 students every single week. And when she sees the pressure starting with a student, she will take them aside and she'll say, you know, you've been coming in late to class, you haven't been turning in your work, can we talk about this? And here's the folks at CAPS, is what we call it, Counseling and Psychological Services. So we try to do that. I will say from our part, because we're taking in a really small group in the Honors College and we have a special orientation, and the reason we do it is, frankly, I had such a tough freshman experience. We do a special 3-day orientation to bring them in, and one of the most important things I think we do, or at least the message I try and convey to our students is, stuff's going to happen here.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard at times, and it's going to be tough. That's okay. Just keep the lines of communication open with us. And I'm very proud of the fact, not that we've had all these students who've had eating disorders and had to take leave of absences to get things together, but the fact that they came to us to say, I can't handle it right now. I'd like to take a break. And we're able to say to them, not only can you take a break, but first, let's make sure you're with the right people who can help you. So I think the communication is vital here with our students to make sure that they know that it's not something to be stigmatized. They shouldn't just suppress it, as we used to in times past. I could tell you about the experiences I had in undergraduate, which were not good. But to say, it's okay, just bring it out, communicate with us, and the university is still going to be here when you're ready.
Yeah, that's a great segue. One of the things I was talking about before the show was this ability to fail, Dr. Almeida. We are living in a society now where it's success breeds upon success. We want to achieve our dreams. We want to accomplish our goals. But I feel like there's less and less playing grounds for people to fail and not have the repercussions be so long-lasting. Academia used to be one of those places where an individual could make mistakes, learn from them, so they don't make bigger mistakes down the road. Are we as a society preventing individuals, young individuals, opportunities to fail?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, again, I think it goes to a lot of the background information and what families do, because you can't, it's hard for faculty, I think, on campus to provide those opportunities, really. I mean, certainly teachers in the classroom, if a student's not doing well, giving them the opportunity to redo a paper or something like that would be an opportunity. But that basic foundation, which is what you're talking about, because a lot of students may not go finish a 4-year degree, but they might find another way to be successful. But it also sort of, I think, harkens back to what did they come with? What were the definitions of success and failure? I mean, we have students, for example, that you know, they're good students, they have high expectations of themselves, but the pressure from the parents a lot of times is so high just on academic performance. They don't care whether the kids have friends, they don't care whether the kids are enjoying themselves, succeeding. It's just bring those A's home. You know, so I think that too is sort of a real, precursor to how these kids do a lot of times. They just give up their hands and they fail.
But the problem is today, I'm hearing from students whose parents are saying, you've got to get the A's and you've got to have the friends because you've got to be balanced.
Oh, yeah.
And so it becomes this mechanistic response sometimes from the parents, and all it does is add pressure. I now have the pressure, I'm supposed to have fun.
Right.
It doesn't work.
It's pressure that breeds upon pressure.
Yeah.
And Dr. Rogers-Fahy, I see you nodding your head. I take it you're in a complete agreement with that.
Absolutely. I think that it's hard for students that when their parents are saying, you cannot pick a major other than nursing or respiratory therapy or something that's more geared towards
law or medicine.
Right, law, medicine. I'm paying for your education. You have to make sure that you've passed all your classes. Like I've had some kids crying in my office saying, I can't fail this class. Like, you don't understand. My parents are going to kill me. Like, and not like literally, but the feeling of like, I have to go home and tell them this. Like, can you talk to them for me?
So there's a tremendous amount of guilt with what it sounds like in terms of, who's really pulling the strings, especially if your education is being paid by for someone else.
Now, the challenge I want to ask you about is, if the student's not doing the work in the classroom, I can't give them a passing grade. So how do you advise students there? I mean, it's one thing, we all have, all of our institutions have provisions. If a student is genuinely having a health, mental, or otherwise issue, they can withdraw or do a late withdrawal, things like that. But as faculty, we are feeling some pressure you've got to let them pass because you're going to harm them otherwise. What are your thoughts about that? Is that...
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's more of the sort of quid pro quo, that you have to give kids a pass regardless of what they're doing. And it goes back to, are you really preparing them for the world? Their first job is not going to give them the pass if they can't fulfill the obligations. So, I think that that's not really the best training for kids a lot of times.
And some professors, it depends where you are in the class, they'll even give you an incomplete, which is like the INC, and they give you an opportunity to sort of finish up the coursework during either like a winter break or summer break and turn stuff in. And I tell them, you should really take advantage of this and really work hard. The professor is willing to give you another chance. This is great. And to try to get a grade, because if you don't within 6 months, it will turn into an F. So they are trying, I think, to find other ways to sort of help them out if something was not, especially freshmen, coming in, that sometimes this is not high school, and this is a wake-up call for some of them.
And I think in the next episode we're going to talk about cheating.
Absolutely.
But that communication is part of, as I said, that's something I preach in our orientation, and that's part of it. If you go to a faculty member and you tell them, look, I'm really personally struggling at the moment. In fact, just this past week had a student who she's taken a leave because of a family crisis, and we communicate that to the faculty. We let them know. I don't know of any faculty, well, that's not true. Every now and then you hear about a faculty member who just doesn't get it. But it's not an issue. We then go to the chair of the department or the dean, and they'll intercede to remove that pressure. But I think that's where we have to be really constructive with our students and our faculty. To say, yeah, there are standards or criteria and you have to meet them. We don't want that to destroy you as an individual, but that's also still, you've got to complete the course in an appropriate fashion. We can't just give everybody a pass through. Because then we end up with the sorts of issues that we're having at primary and secondary level, where folks, they're moving into high school or they're trying to move into college and they're not adequately prepared. And the same thing, as you said, Dr. Almeida, will happen with the workforce.
So I'd like to actually transition our conversation from stress to burnout. Now, unlike stress, it is said that burnout is characterized by disengagement, not overengagement, by feeling emptied, devoid of motivation, and beyond caring and not seeing any hope of positive change in one's situation. From an academic standpoint, is burnout seen as a gateway to dropout? Dr. Brady, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think that certainly if they're stuck in a track and they're just not, they're frustrated, they're burned out, and ultimately they will drop out. They won't complete the requirement that's there. Now the positive is, with good advising, that should be a moment, an indicator to help them see, assuming it's all around the curriculum, let's find an appropriate path for you.
Right.
So my personal story, I started out in college, I was chemistry pre-med, I had done internships at NIH. I really knew this is what I was going to do. I mean, I was really well educated on it. I'd done lots of lab work. And I was disinterested. I got into the labs and I started doing the work, and I realized I don't want to be here the rest of my life. And I, burned out. I really was. And it took a little while to figure out where I was going to realign to. Once I did, I hit my stride and I did very well. But it was, so that's the plus is within that college environment with the right, as long as the support and advising is there, academic advising, to find the new area. I think it's more difficult when we're out in the job force.
Right.
And it's not necessarily so easy within Chase to turn to your boss and say, I'm bored, give me a new job,
God knows I've thought about that. So
Yeah.
you lead some of the brightest minds at Penn State University, at the Honors College at Shire. What type of environment are you setting in place to provide a nurturing environment to let them succeed, to let them cope with stress and teach them those skills without having them turn towards burning out?
As I said earlier, we try to start it from day one. In fact, it's even before that, during recruitment phase. I talk an awful lot about the fact that we want well-rounded individuals. Now, I'm keenly aware of the fact that we have contradictory pressures. We're recruiting students and we're expecting them to have absolutely the hardest high school curriculum possible and achieve essentially straight A's in it, and want them to have a balanced life and so on. I have a daughter who's in high school, and I'm trying to say to her, I still want you to be a healthy individual, and if that means that you're not going to do great in this class, or you're not going to have all sorts of leadership experience, that's okay. But then in my role as the dean, as we're evaluating applications, that's what we're looking for. So I actually talk in many of our recruitment phases about saying to students, it's okay if you don't come into the Honors College. We want the kids who are able to do this, but are also pretty happy about it.
Right.
In terms of how we do it, it's the communication. It's the things that I've already said before.
Sure.
To let them understand, we recognize they're not automatons. We're not expecting them to be drones who are just going to do the work. They're going to have ups and downs in their lives. We're going to be here the whole time. We're going to be here long afterwards as an institution. If they need the time, take the time. And so that's building the relationships ultimately is the strength, I think.
Excellent. On that same point, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, do you mind taking a minute or two just talking about the work of the BMCC Counseling Center?
Sure, like the students that we see.
Or actually the services that you provide?
The services that we provide. We have personal and academic counseling. So if someone's having difficulties in the classroom, we would like to know about it because we can sort of file grade appeals or help them try to withdraw from classes. We're definitely a source of support. We try to get all sorts of referrals within the community. So if they do need something like medication or they need a higher level of care, we definitely want to make sure that they're well taken care of. If they don't have health insurance, we can refer them to what we have is called Single Stop, and they will assist in sort of trying to assist them in getting health care, because as you know, that's one of the hardest things to get in this country right now, especially for most of our students, and international students especially.
So it sounds like the general takeaway, and I think we can all agree upon this, is that there's always going to be stress. It's going to come in many forms, but it's ultimately the responsibility of the individual to go to the sources, to leverage the resources that are available to be able to help cope with it. Because if they don't take advantage of it, no one else can do anything.
But I think it's the responsibility of the institution to make sure those resources are there and clearly articulated to the students so that they know that they're available. And that's the pressure I think a lot of us are feeling in leadership, is we want to make sure that we have the right balance and the right amount there, and the students know about it.
Excellent. Well, it definitely sounds like it's a starting point, but there's still a lot more work to be done from the academic standpoint. On that note, Dr. Almeida, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, and Dr. Brady, thank you so much for your time today. I'd like to thank you for your unique perspectives.
Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to thank our guests for joining us. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments for myself, feel free to reach out to me via email or Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.